Well, good morning and Merry Christmas. How's everybody doing? Wow, I was not expecting that. That was nice. Wow, that's good. Y'all make a note and do that next time too. That was fantastic. Well, I'm so glad you guys are here celebrating the birth of our Savior with us today. Today we're going to be finishing up our series called A Christmas Playlist. And what we've done over the last 4 weeks is take some of our favorite Christmas carols and dig down into them to find out a deeper meaning that they have. Something that was unexpected or something we couldn't maybe see right off the bat. And today we're going to do that again. And we're going to be using the song, Do You Hear What I Hear? Now, many people, based on what we've talked about in the last few weeks, have already guessed that this is a European written song, probably back from the 1800s. And if you think that, then you would be absolutely wrong. Actually, this song is not that way. It was written in 1962 in America during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a time of unrest and uncertainty, and this song was written at that time. Now, Noel René thought he had a brilliant musical career ahead of him. He attended at the Strasbourg Conservatory. He was at the Conservatoire National de Paris. But when the Second World War hit in France, and France was taken over like in 3 days, that all kind of got shattered, and it all kind of disappeared on him. And then what was even more so is that the German troops conscripted a lot of French people to be in the German army. And Noel was one of those guys who was forced to serve the Germans. Now, he didn't like that at all. It was not enjoyable for him. He really pushed back against that. As a matter of fact, he began working for the French underground during that time. But he stayed a German officer. And so he would go ahead and give information to the French, and they would plan attacks. One such event that kind of cemented in his mind and shaped him and changed the way he viewed a lot was he was given the task of taking his troop of German soldiers into a French trap. And so as he took them into this area where the French were waiting in ambush, the vision of all the enemy soldiers being killed around him forever scarred his mind. Now, Noel was even shot during that attack, and very few French soldiers were harmed at all. And now it's said that they shot Noel so the Germans wouldn't suspect him of being an informant. They were doing that to protect him. If he was shot, then he was part of the fray as well. But we never will know what truly happened because Noel never decided to talk about that again. It forever scarred who he was. Shortly after that event, he defected from the German army and continued working with the French underground, but he couldn't be with the Germans anymore at that time. Shortly after the war, in the 1950s, he moved to Manhattan. And he got a job in Manhattan writing show tunes and ad jingles. That was kind of what he was doing at that time. He married, when he was in Manhattan, it was a pianist that he married, and her name was Gloria Shane, and together they had a daughter. Now, Gloria was a piano player who played for a lot of these things. She also wrote music that many of the popular artists at that time used. I was going to name the artists, but I figured no one in here would actually know their names because I didn't know them when I read them. So there's no point in that. But they were really popular back then. And then everything with the Cuban Missile Crisis kind of came to a head, right? So if you don't know, the Russians had put missiles on Cuba so they could attack the U.S. And it got to be a very tense situation. For those of you who are older, you may remember that happening. My grandfather actually was on a destroyer that was tracking a Russian submarine in the Gulf of Mexico. He told us that before he passed away, and there was a lot of things that were happening in that time. And one thing that Noel recognized on the face of New Yorkers was that fear and dread of uncertainty that war brings. He had experienced that himself when he had been his country taken over and was forced to serve in war. And it broke his heart to see the land that he went to flee that kind of oppression, facing that oppression. And he was given a job by his producer to write a song, and a kind of an uplifting song during this time to maybe help out, because the radio was a big hit back then. That's what people listened to. Noel was pondering that, walking home from work one day, and he saw two moms pushing their kids in strollers. And he looked at those two children, ignorant of what was happening all around them, just looking at each other, smiling. And it inspired him. And he had this idea of two little lambs just looking at each other. And so he ran home, and he began to pen, "So the night wind to the little lamb." As he wrote down the rest of the words, he called his wife into the room and said, "Hey, I need you to come up with some music to go along with these lyrics that I am writing." And so the two of them began to work, and together they created this Christmas classic. There have been over 100 versions of Do You Hear What I Hear since 1962 that have been done by artists. But the most popular, the most famous, and what put this song on the map was the fact that Bing Crosby decided to sing it. And back in that day, if Bing Crosby sang your song, it was a guaranteed hit, particularly if it was a Christmas song. And so Bing Crosby sang it, and it became a regular Christmas song for many people. You see, Noel wrote this song to talk about peace, to talk about what the world needed was peace. And although many people sing this song and hear this song, they often miss the message of peace. They're more focused on the message of the birth of Jesus. But if you know anything about Jesus, he came to bring peace, which is why he wrote this song. As a matter of fact, in an interview, Noel René one time said he couldn't believe how many people had no clue what the song was really about, that they just sang it to sing it. But today, as we look through this, and as this song is sung in churches around our country, let's play that this message of peace will kind of be put in around and talked about when it comes to this carol. Now, when I was growing up, my mom made me take piano lessons, okay? That was like a rule that all of her kids are gonna take piano lessons until they're 16 years old. And so that was kind of laid out the law there, and that was something we were expected and required to do. And so I loved music, I loved listening to music. I wasn't necessarily a big fan of having to play it. And it's a lot easier to sit back and listen versus having to go practice piano every single day. And at least 30 minutes, my mom would put the microwave timer on. For 30 minutes, we'd have to sit there and practice piano. And literally, if you had a little pause, she'd go stop the microwave. Are you not practicing? And then you'd have to start over again. So, it was the real deal, 30 minutes we had to practice. And so that's what we had to do. And so I began to really not enjoy playing piano. But we took piano from a family friend. And she taught some other people as well, but because she was just kind of did out of her house, there was never big recitals or anything like that. So if you learned a piano piece, you pretty much just played it for her, and that's all it went. And so one year at Christmas time, we decided that I would play Do You Hear What I Hear? And it was one of my favorite Christmas songs. I'll be cool, I don't mind learning how to play that song. And at that point, I was kind of getting advanced in piano playing-ish, so I had to use both hands and big chords and all this stuff. And so it was kind of a complicated piece to it. And as I was working on that and practicing that, something awful happened. What was awful that happened is my dad's a pastor, and they were getting ready for Christmas services at church, and he decided for one of his messages he wanted to have Do You Hear What I Hear? Then my mom was like, hey, our son is learning how to play that song. Maybe he should play that in church for us. And they thought that was a great idea. I thought it was a horrible idea. I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life. That's just stupid. Why would you do that? We have a piano player at church. She would have her feelings hurt if I had to go up and take that song. No. It's one of those things in life when you're a child that you're not really asked, hey, would you like to do this? It's more put to you like, hey, don't you want to play piano on Sunday? It was more of a rhetorical question. Was really, this is a command. You will be doing this. And so I began to actually have to practice even more because, I'm not great at the piano. I wasn't great. I would play a couple chords and I would get to pause. Okay, then go again, pause. Yeah. So when I learned to pick up a guitar, Andrew was like, yeah, he can play a song if you have 10 minutes to listen to that song because, it's usually a 2-minute song, but I'm like, okay, yeah, it just didn't go along. The coordination wasn't quite there, okay? And so I was mortified. And let me tell you how mortified this was, how this impacted my life, is I can remember exactly the room that I played this song in, okay? We were a new church. We were meeting in an old Catholic seminary on the edge of the Mississippi River in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It was a big assembly room with a stage up at the front. The piano was off to the right side, church, and a little tilt to the right there like that. And I remember sitting down at that bench. I remember the sheet music on the piano. I remember my mom was kind of standing off to the side. I remember all the people were sitting behind me. And fortunately, I wasn't facing them. I remember it to the detail. I remember the nerves. You can tell I'm talking faster because it still makes me nervous, okay? I can remember every bit of that. Because here's the thing. When you're a kid learning to play piano and you're told, hey, you need to play in play for your teacher, there's a little bit of nerves there, okay? Because she's going to judge me and grade me on this, right? And then when you have to play in a recital, there's more nerves because, hey, people are going to be listening to what I'm playing. But I was told they were going to be singing to what I was playing. And that's a whole nother level right there because everybody is basing their musicality on me. We didn't have a band like this where if somebody dropped out, no big deal, everybody else is carrying it. It was me and only me. And guess what? I paused 3 times during that song. I was like, and the people would just be singing, they'd stop, and they'd pick back up, they'd pause with me. Afterward, everybody's like, you did a great job. I'm like, no, I didn't, but people are gracious and nice like that, like, oh, it's so good, And they're like, no, not so good. And so but I always appreciate that. That they were like, hey, you did all right there. But I mean, let me tell you this. There's one thing that happened after I played that song. I couldn't wait for my 16th birthday to come. It couldn't get here fast enough, and I could quit playing piano. A concert pianist is not my forte. It's not what I was called to be. I was called to be something different. And that ended my piano career permanently. But, that was the thing about it. And that song impacted me. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to break down this song and talk about this song and what it means to us today. And again, it's laid out to be a prayer of peace. It's laid out to be something that calls our attention to something greater and better there. And so as it does that, though, I think there's some basic theological concepts in this song that we should pay attention to. And this song, let's walk through it and talk about this child that came. And this song starts with a couple of questions, pretty simple questions. The first question is this: do you see what I see? All right, now it's Christmas time, and if you're watching Christmas movies at home, many of you do. I enjoy watching Christmas movies. One of my favorites is Tim Allen's The Santa Claus. Don't know if you've ever seen that. If not, I'll pray for you. I'll go home and watch it today. But it's a great little Christmas movie. And in that movie, there's this scene where Scott Calvin, SC, becomes Santa. He and his son Charlie deliver gifts that first night. And when the reindeer are done, they take them to the North Pole. Now, they've never been to the North Pole. They're freaking out a little bit, like, what's going on here? I don't know what's going on here. And as they get descended into the sleigh and into the special magical elf area, there, Scott Calvin's running like, what's going on here? Like, he's seeing stuff, but he's like not understanding what's happening to him. And so he's running around, freaking out. Even though he's seeing, he doesn't believe he's Santa Claus. Everybody's looking like, who's in charge here? Well, you are. No, I'm not. And all this is happening. And in that scene, something happens. Okay, he begins to have this conversation with one of the elves named Judy, and Judy is just the one who helps take care of Santa, and she brings him some hot chocolate. And in their conversation, Judy makes this comment right here. She says, seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. Seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. And all that statement comes from a Christmas movie, and we're like, okay, it was a Disney production. I don't know how we talk about that in church, right? But I think there's a deep truth and theology in that statement. If you remember the disciple Thomas, right? Thomas made one statement, and he's known for eternity now as Doubting Thomas, okay? But Thomas made a statement. If we look at the book of John, chapter 20, it says this: now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciple told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. For Thomas, seeing wasn't believing. Well, seeing was believing, sorry. And for many people in the world today, the same holds true. Unless they see something happen, unless they can witness it themselves, they're not going to believe in that truth. It's only true if I actually get to experience it, see it myself. But there's something wrong with that. I want you to see that. Look at, Thomas wasn't condemned by Jesus for having to see to believe. He didn't say, Thomas, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? He didn't say, Thomas, you're the worst disciple ever. Why did you do that? He said, Thomas, here it is. Here's my hands. Here's my side. Now you can believe. All right? But what Jesus did say is how much better, how blessed are those who believe without seeing. Because here's the thing that Jesus knew. When you believe, God will open your eyes and you will be able to see things you could never see before. You see, believing is seeing. If I believe something to be true, then I will see that truth. It's not the other way around. It's not if I see it, then it happens to be true. No, that just means I'm catching up and I'm slow. We need to believe because we can't see God directly. When we believe in him, we begin to see the effects that he's had in our lives. We begin to see all that God is doing. We begin to see how God is moving. And it comes from that belief that we can have in him. The next question this song asks is this. It says, do you hear what I hear? In the movie, The Polar Express, another Christmas movie, there's a bunch of random children packed onto this train that's going to the North Pole. Now, there's something interesting about this movie. I was trying to do some research and tell this story, and it didn't dawn on me until I was writing this. Do you realize there are 18 children on that train? You know how many names we know of the children on that train? 1. Billy. Y'all know who Billy is, right? He's the kid from the poor side of the tracks who Santa never came to see. There is no other name given the rest of that movie for any child. It's weird, okay? I don't know how they do that. I guess they couldn't afford a writer to name people that day. So they said, hey, we'll just name Billy and call it good. All right, so anyway, in this movie, the kid who the movie's about, maybe the hero kid, if you will, because he's the one who's kind of like the one we're following his story. He is at the North Pole. Santa and the reindeer come out, and the reindeer are jumping up and down, and there's all these bells all over the reindeer. And all these people are cheering, and the kids are going crazy. And this kid, our hero, is looking, and he hears nothing. He sees the bells moving up and down. He hears nothing. Then in the movie, one of the bells comes off of one of the reindeer, and it comes bouncing to his feet. And he bends down, and he picks up that bell, and he holds it to his ear, and he shakes it. Nothing. And he shakes it, and nothing. Then he closes his eyes, and he goes, I believe, I believe, I believe. And he starts shaking. Guess what? He could hear the bell ring. Do you hear what I hear? You see, some of us are like that. There are things going on all around us, and we can't hear what's going on. And there could be good reasons, right? There may be too much background noise, or maybe we aren't paying close enough attention, or maybe we just don't want to. You know, kids, when your parents are talking, you're like, yep, just turn that off. I don't want to listen to that, right? That's what we do. And it's not that something's being said, it's just that we don't hear it. But this song is asking us today, really, can you hear what God is telling you? Can you come into contact and hear what God is trying to do in your life? And for many of us, we can't hear God, and many of the reasons are the exact same. For some of us, we're just too busy. This time of year, there's too many distractions, too much noise, and we're just not paying attention to God. And we can't hear him. For others, what's sad is we know what God's going to tell us, and we don't want to hear what God has to say. And so we're not going to put ourselves in that situation to hear God. But whatever the reason is, God has a message for us this Christmas, and we need to make sure that we can hear him. The third question asked is this: do you know what I know? So sometimes, I'll be talking to somebody, and maybe we'll get into a technical conversation, and I start getting into great detail about what's going to happen or what had happened and all this type of stuff. And I feel like people are tracking with me, you know? And what I think is their nod of approval is really, it's like a glazed over look, like I have no clue what's happening here, right? Because at some point I realize, yeah, they have no clue what I'm talking about. Or I'll ask a question like, huh? What do you mean? Right? And so I'm like, oh, now, when I was younger, I would think, well, those people aren't very smart. They can't keep up with me, right? But then I realized as I've gotten older, my wife told me so, that that's not what's happening at all. The problem is I'm making an assumption that people know what I know. I'm assuming because they may have even known a little bit about what I know, that they know as much as I know about what I know. And here's the problem with that. When I make the assumption of that, that issue is not on them. That issue is on me. An assumption issue is an us issue, not a them issue. We have to make sure that they know what we know, and then we can talk about it. I think so many times we make assumptions, right? We make an assumption that somebody knows all about Jesus because we saw them go to a church one time. Maybe they just went to a church one time. They know nothing about him. You see, when we assume, when we start talking to people and we don't know what they know, then we can put ourselves in a bad situation. So the first thing we need to do is hey, let's make sure that we're all on the same page. Let's stop assuming and start asking questions and know what they know. Now, the last thing that Do You Hear What I Hear does is it stops asking questions and it starts declaring things. It says, listen to what I say. The song wants us to know what all the questions were about. It wants us to know the purpose for everything that has happened. And that purpose is this child will bring us goodness and light. That this child that has come will bring us peace. That this child is the whole point of what we're doing. So what do we do with all that? What does that mean for us today, right? Outside of being a good Christmas carol, it does have an impact on how we live our lives. And it should for both why it was written, and it should for another reason that I think is very important in this, and maybe not intended by the writer. Because when I look at this song, what I see is a great model of how to tell people about Jesus, how to have people listen to what I say. And how we do that is a two-part system. The first part is this: ask questions. Ask questions. We don't know where people stand in their faith, so let's ask questions to find out, right? Now, we need to be careful when we ask questions, okay? You don't just walk up to somebody you've never met before and, you know Jesus Christ to be the Lord and Savior of your life? Okay, don't ask that question ever, okay? That's not a conversation starter. That's not a good question for somebody who you've known for a long time, okay? Don't ask that question. The question is, hey, my name is Pete, what's your name? That's a great first question for somebody you've never met before, okay? You want to build something with someone. You want to create something. You see, the world is at war with Christ. And you may be thinking not every single person, but the devil and all of his demons, they're at war with Christ. And so anything and anyone who tries to share Christ is going to find themselves at war and in conflict. So how we approach people matters. How we begin to ask questions matters. It makes a difference. Matthew 10:16 tells us this: behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpent and innocent as doves. We need to be careful how we share the good news. I don't know if you know this, but when sheep go among wolves, you know what wolves like to eat? Sheep. Okay, so if you're going out, it says to be as sly as a serpent. Most people don't see snakes until it's too late. Snakes don't sit in your front yard up on their heads going, hey, look at me. Okay, they don't do that. They slither. They hide. But at the same time, we need to be innocent as doves. In other words, whatever we do, people can't look and be like, man, that Jesus is messed up. Look how they act. It matters what we do. You have to learn to read the room. You have to learn to look around the people around you and see what's going on and become part of what's happening. Know when to speak and know when to stay quiet. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just be present. You also need to be self-aware. I am not the best person to share Jesus with everyone. I do a really good job of sharing Jesus with people who are like me. Because when I talk with them, I can find common things. We can connect. And I can build a relationship with them where when they hear what I'm saying, they're like, he understands a lot of my life. He probably understands this part too. Okay? If I were to go into a biker bar, they probably won't listen to me very good. But I know Christians who would fit in great in that environment and would be much more effective at sharing the gospel than I would in that situation. So sometimes I need to be self-aware and realize, hey, I can be a good influence on this person. I can be a light in the darkness to that person, but I also don't need to try to shove Jesus down their throat because I'm not the right person to do that. Did you know that on average it takes 18 people to win someone to Christ? 18 people to win someone to Christ. So your job, because you don't know where you are in that gamut of 18, your job is to leave the door open for somebody else. Your job is to drop a seed along the way, to drop a bit of knowledge along the way and let someone else come and do more. 1 Peter 3:15 once said this: put in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense for anyone who asks you for the reason that you have hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. In other words, if I come to somebody who's a biker and is like, why are you so happy? I can be like, hey, I just found Jesus in my life and that's great. But I need to answer that person in such a way where the door is always open for somebody else. I need to treat them with gentleness. I need to treat them with respect. I need to treat them in love. When you ask questions, you got to be aware of that. You see, sharing your faith is not about winning an argument. It's not about you being right and them being wrong. It's about the fact that they're going to die and go to hell one day, and you don't want that to happen. You want them to meet Jesus and go to heaven. There's a lot more at stake than you being right. So if you can't convince that person, then back off, walk away, and leave them in a good place where somebody else can come talk to them one day. Guys, that's so important. Like gets like. Sometimes the best people to share Jesus are those who are just like them. Which leads us to the second part of this evangelism strategy in this song. Share what you know. Share what you know. If I had $1 for every time someone told me, well, I can't share the gospel because I don't know the Bible very well, what do you know? If you follow Jesus, you know what Jesus has done in your life. What Jesus has done in your life is an indisputable fact. No one can argue it. No one can argue what Jesus did for you. They can just hear and be like, that's pretty cool. Share how Jesus changed your life. Because if they're like you, if they have a similar walk in life like you, then what you share might impact them. Because you know what? I was going through a similar situation. My uncle, one of my uncles just passed away last week. He's been sick for quite a while. My aunt, who's a super strong Christian, hugely involved when she was young, used to come to our house, a super Christian, fell in love with my uncle, and he didn't know Jesus. And she thought, hey, I'm strong enough as a Christian that I can marry him and win him over to Christ. 20 years later, my uncle still doesn't know Christ. My aunt's devastated because for 20 years, she hasn't been able to get him to follow Christ. He's a good man, good guy. Let his kids go to church, all of them became Christians. He's just not him. He lost his job. He got placed by a temp agency. And he's sitting at a desk, there are two desks together, he's sitting at a desk just despondent over the fact he's lost his job. This career that he had for 20 years no longer has. And across the way was a guy, they started talking and sharing stories. Very similar situation. But that guy had hope. That guy had a positive outlook. My Uncle Don asked that man, like, we both lost our jobs of over 20 years. How are you so happy? And that man shared Jesus with my uncle. And at that desk, he prayed and accepted Christ. You see, my aunt for 20 years, strong Christian woman, couldn't do it. But a guy who was in a similar situation, similar walk of life, shared what Jesus did for him, shared the hope that he had. And it changed my uncle's eternity forever. In sports, you're guaranteed to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. However, if you start taking shots, there's a small percentage some of those might go in. You know the same is true of sharing your faith? You're guaranteed to save 0 people from hell if you don't tell anybody about Jesus. But if you start sharing what Jesus has done in your life, you might just save some. Like, there's just not a program. It's not like some formula. It's just being real with people and saying, this is what Jesus did in my life. When they ask you, why are you happy? How can you go through this hard time in life and have peace? What's going on? And you can share, it's just because of Jesus in my life, that changes things. Romans 10:14-15 says this. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. You see, do you hear what I hear? It's a message of peace that is desperately needed today as it was when it was written 60 years ago. In the midst of darkness and uncertainty, the song was written to remind us of hope. So help people you meet to see that hope. To come and get to know that person of Jesus Christ who was born in a manger 2,000 years ago. Help remove distractions so they can hear. Help people see what you can see about God. Help people to know, ask questions, find out. And then tell them about Jesus so they can listen to what we say. For the child sleeping in the night, he will bring us goodness and light. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, as we celebrate the birth of your Son, God, as we have decorated for a month and as we've sung songs and gotten with family and just for most of us have this cheerier disposition. God, let's remember there's a purpose for all of that. There's a reason for all of that. And that reason, God, that you came for a purpose. You came with a plan. God, to reconcile us to yourselves, to bring us peace, to bring us goodness, to bring us light in a dark world. God, my prayer is that sometime between today and tomorrow, God, each family would just stop and thank you for that. God, in the midst of getting gifts, in the midst of fantastic meals with friends and family, God, that we would pause. God, we would see what you see. We would hear what you hear. God, we would know what you know. And God, we would listen to what you say. And God, that we would give you all the glory, God, all the praise and all the honor. Jesus, thank you so much for loving us. God, in your name we pray. Amen.